Hey, Derek here from Civic Punks, and I am in an airport. Yes, Pearson Airport. I'm attempting to make my way to Singapore. I say attempting because there's been some snags. My flight got cancelled this morning to go to Vancouver. So now it looks like Vancouver's not happening. I'm sorry, Vancouver. I will catch you on the way back. But I think I should still be able to make my Singapore flight, which will be good. Because obviously I want to go to Singapore and see everybody there. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I want to sort of reflect. It's now been a couple days since the Government Innovation Week this past couple days, and I want to reflect on some of the key themes that came out of that. Going into the pre-game, I talked about sort of three key themes I thought would be important throughout the event. So theme one was this idea of digital sovereignty and Canadian capacity, this idea that we're really focusing on building Canada's capacity. The second one was this idea of the major cuts that are really cutting through the public service and really shaking things up in a big way and hitting morale. And the third theme, of course, is AI, because AI is absolutely everywhere. Okay, so let's walk through and see whether they were actually the themes in the day or not. All right, so with regards to digital sovereignty and domestic capacity, well, the opening keynote was on digital sovereignty, so check. But it was really interesting. It was given by a guy from IBM named Robert Conlon, and in some ways it was really helpful. I mean, he really laid out this idea of digital sovereignty having different capacities to it, so AI, our sovereignty over AI, and particularly given how in every aspect of our life AI is going to be coming, and the data that's trained on AI, that just how much do we control the AI capacity. Robert talked about sort of four key elements to think about digital sovereignty. Data, so where's your data housed? Do you control it? Second one is operational. Who operates the stuff that you depend upon in terms of your digital infrastructure? Third is the technology itself. Who's built the technology? Who has the capacity, the skills to build the technology? And the fourth one is AI. AI is now absolutely everywhere. How does that impact our sovereignty when we're using these AI technologies and becoming so fundamental? I thought it was actually really helpful to look at the stuff that he put together. The thing I found interesting the whole entire time he was talking is the big question, the one big question in the room that everybody had on their mind, particularly if you're working in the government of Canada, is look, our whole entire digital infrastructure is American. It's owned by American companies. We now know that the American government will squeeze these technologies when it's to their advantage. That makes us really vulnerable as a country. What do we do about that? That's the big question. And of course, he didn't touch that. I mean, IBM is an American company, maybe that's why, I don't know. But I did feel like there was a key piece that was missing. I kind of felt like his audience would have made more sense if it was a bunch of people working in business as opposed to government. But nonetheless, great framework, great way to get things going. I thought that was quite interesting. The other place where you see digital sovereignty coming out in a big way was, so the next person to come and speak was Scott Jones, who's the president of SSC. And one of the things that Scott Jones talked about was he kind of sent a clear message to vendors, and there's a lot of vendors there. He's like, look, we are really focused on building up Canadian businesses, and we want to diversify who we work with. We want to move away from vendor leverage. Monopolies is maybe another way of saying it, but this core idea that there's a need to diversify how government engages with vendors and who it engages with, which I thought was really interesting. The other thing that was really interesting on that front is he talked about open source and open standards, and really framed the fundamental need of open source and open standards as this whole idea of confidence and competence. He said confidence, but once he did a Freudian slip and said competence as well. But his idea is look, if you're a confident company, you are using open standards, you're using open source. If you're insecure, you don't, because then you feel like you need to control things. But if you're confident in what your product is, people will pick you, so you don't need to try to just control everything. And so that was sort of a siren call to all the vendors in the room that Canada is going to be focused on Canadian companies. They're going to be focusing on diversifying who they work with, moving away from big companies to more and more small and medium enterprises, and really pushing this idea of open source and open standards. Now, I will say some level of skepticism. We've heard this from senior leadership before, and yet we're still in a situation where the vast majority of purchasing the government does is still to major companies. So we'll see. We'll see if this is not just a big speech, but actually has some real teeth to it in the future. But really cool, really interesting. Okay, so that's theme one, very much a focus on digital sovereignty and really building up Canada's capacity. The second theme of high cuts. I'll be honest, I didn't see any mention of this anywhere in the day. No one talked about the cuts, no one talked about the morale. I was surprised. I felt like it's kind of ignoring an elephant that's in the room, but there you go, no one talked about it. The third theme, of course, is AI. That I mentioned in the pregame, that is up and down the agenda. So how did that play out? And I kind of frame it as, on one hand, there's a whole idea of it's about raising the floor. And so one example where I see this happen is this whole idea, again, going back to Scott Jones, the president of SSC, is this idea of CAN chat. So Can Chat is the new internal AI chatbot that Scott is really hoping becomes basically the central thing that public servants use moving forward. And it's a built-in Canada AI chatbot. That's quite exciting. There is some skepticism because my understanding is it's built on some older models. So it's not the most high-tech AI chatbot, but it's a powerful tool. And very much Scott's vision is that this is going to be augmenting public servants everywhere, that every public servant should be using this, within a year's time. And this will be sort of a huge boost to public servant capacity. So that's sort of the floor. This is like everybody's going to be using this. This is going to be the floor in which AI is used within the government. The ceiling was where I think some of the more interesting stuff is really happening. My favorite talk in the whole entire day was by this guy named Dr. Jason Shepard from Fujitsu. And he talked a lot about AI agents and AI and digital twins. And basically saying, look, these are going to be two things that are going to define how we work moving forward. So on the digital twin side, it means that we're going to have basically digital replicas of everything we do, including they're now exploring into the social space. And a digital twin in the social space allows us to actually have sandboxes to play and tweak with policies. We can actually test out policies in a digital sandbox and see what some of the potential implications are before we go live with it. That's huge. So the potential digital twins, I think, is going to be really interesting in leveraging data to allow us to have sandboxes where we can play and test stuff out in a safe environment before we go live with things. And that will hopefully lead to better quality policy, better quality programs. It's going to have a big impact on it. But the other side of it is AI agents. And look, this is already here. It's just going to be a question of how long is it going to take for government to sort of really start implementing this stuff. And the idea is that AI agents are going to become active members of any work that we do. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a CIO in the Government of Canada, and he was talking about how, in his vision moving forward, his employees will have their own agent, their own team of agents. And what does that mean when all of a sudden our employees are no longer sort of just on the implementation side, but they're like managing teams of agents? How does that change our capacity? How does that change the role of public service? I think this is where we're starting to get to the higher end of what's possible with AI. I mean, this will hopefully be the floor in a couple of years from now, but right now this is the ceiling. This is where sort of things are going. It's this idea of really leveraging AI agents to significantly increase the capacity. I mean, think about that. Imagine as a public servant, you had your own AI agent, your own AI employee that you could sort of help send you off to do stuff, do research for you, organize things for you. Now imagine you could have a whole team of these agents, and these agents could have specialized skills in a way that you don't. And your job then is just to manage and give strategic direction to it. This is the future of where we're going with AI, and it's quite exciting to see it start to be talked about within the context of this event. Okay, what else? What are some other things that popped up? It was really interesting. So this is a theme I noticed in day one as well, but there's sort of this move to talk about outcome as opposed to process, right? This idea that we're so focused in government on process, really we need to shift to outcome, because if we become too focused on process, we lose sight of the outcome. We might not even get to the outcome. We'll be like, look, hey, we followed the process perfectly, and who cares what the outcome is? I mean, I'm being crass about this, but like, this is sort of the stereotype of government. And so it was a common theme in talk after talk and panel after panel, this idea that we need to move towards outcomes instead of processes. That's great, but I feel like there's a disconnect because we talk that talk, but then when you dig into it, it's all about the process in government. You see it, and it's because the incentives are there. We optimize. There's someone who mentioned this idea that there's a real optimization of fidelity for process in terms of what public servants are evaluated on. The processes that it's all about process, the way the government is structured, the way the incentives are built into things. So I feel like, yes, it's great to hear everybody talk about outcome and how we need to move from process to outcome. How? Because we're not doing it right now, and the structures of government aren't doing it. And you can talk about all you want, but until you change the incentives, until you change the structures, we're still going to have a fidelity for process. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And I think, why is it that we have such a huge focus on process? I think it's because it allows for scale, it allows for control, it allows for harmonization across such a complex and messy thing as government. Equality of making sure everybody has equal access to things. These are why we gravitate towards process, but we've over-dialed for process. I think everybody agrees with that. The question is, like, how do we get ourselves out of this? The other thing I thought was interesting that jumped out at me, it was interesting hearing the CIO for the Government of Canada, Dominic Roshan, speak. I think, honestly, the thing that stuck out for me from his talk was near the end, he talked about how, yes, we need to learn how to move fast, but we have to be careful about this. That when government moves fast without being careful, you end up with a phoenix. You end up with, a health.gov in the States. You end up with these problems. And it was kind of this interesting sort of counterpoint to a lot of the rest of the tone through most other people of like, we got to move faster, we got to move faster. Government's falling further and further behind, and here's our CIO basically saying, hold on here. Let's not move too fast, let's be aware of the cost of that. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that, but it was interesting to see. And it's a fair point. We do, as government, have to be careful because the costs of what we do are significant. That said, I feel like the standard position of senior leadership in government has always been towards caution as opposed towards moving fast. So yeah, anyways. But great conversations, lots of fun. I mean, it was great to meet, see old friends, meet new friends. And I'm going to be really curious to see how this conversation that's happening in Canada compares to, say, some of the conversations I'm going to be seeing in the next couple of weeks when I'm in Singapore, Malaysia, and actually at the Government Innovation Week. So Public Sector Network is organizing a Government Innovation Week in Melbourne, and I'll be there in a month's time. So it'll be really interesting to compare how Australia is feeling compared to how Canada's feeling. And you can hear all about it by subscribing to Civic Punks, and I'll see you there.